So last week we did a quick review on poetry, looking at figurative language, which is something you worked with a lot in English 1, and we looked at it again in English 2. Today I want to talk about this idea of poetic structure. We haven't discussed it at all this year, but I want to bring it up because it will come up in English 3 and English 4 when you continue to analyze poetry. So, what is poetic structure? Well, today I'm going to look at three main things. We're going to look at stanzas, lines, and punctuation. So, reviewing stanzas. Remember, stanzas are a group of lines in a poem, and there is a space between each stanza. Stanzas are kind of like the paragraphs of poetry. So, taking a look at the example on the right, Dreams by Langston Hughes, how many stanzas are in the poem? Now, how are stanzas and structure connected? Short stanzas are going to generally express a simple thought. So let's take a look at the example on the right. And I'm only going to read the first stanza. And it says, "Hold fast to dreams, for if dreams die, life is a broken-winged bird that cannot fly." So it's a short stanza, and what the speaker is trying to tell us is to hold on to or to keep your dreams. Because if your dreams die, your life is going to be broken. Your life is not going to move on. Your life is not going to fly. So, very short stanza to basically tell us don't give up on your dreams. Don't give up on your dreams. And generally, when you're looking at a poem with many stanzas, the poet usually is going to have one idea in each stanza. So each stanza will have kind of its own main idea. And as the poem continues, this is where we will usually see a shift or a change from one stanza to the next. Let's take a look at how this works in the poem "This Is Just to Say" by William Carlos Williams. "I have eaten the plums that were in the icebox, and which you were probably saving for breakfast. Forgive me, they were delicious, so sweet and so cold." So, taking a look at the first stanza, the main idea is just that I ate some fruit in the refrigerator. Not a big deal, right? But in the second stanza, we find out that the speaker's maybe wife, maybe roommate, friend, was probably planning to eat that fruit for their breakfast. So now that the fruit is gone, there could be a conflict. Last stanza. "Forgive me, they were delicious, so sweet and so cold." The speaker saying, I couldn't help it. I couldn't stop myself from taking that fruit. It was too tempting and it looked too good. So in these three stanzas, we see this idea of I ate some fruit. You were planning to eat it. I'm sorry. Now, sometimes a poet is not going to use stanzas at all, and instead their poem may be one continuous stanza. So these long stanzas are generally going to convey a type of reflection, a type of thinking. Okay, it's called stream of consciousness, and what that means is it's just thinking that is happening. Okay, and just like when you tell a friend a story or you talk to somebody about a memory you have, you don't really stop to think about the details before you speak. You're just speaking. And that's exactly what the speaker in the poem Oranges by Gary Soto is doing. I'm not going to read all of this, but let's just kind of take a look at how it starts. And it says, "The first time I walked with a girl, I was 12, cold, and weighed down with 2 oranges in my jacket." So again, as the speaker is telling us about this memory, he's not really stopping to think, or to plan what he's telling us. He's just telling us what comes to his mind as he remembers this memory of walking with a girl for the first time. So, how do stanzas connect to structure? All right, let's take a look at lines. Now, of course, every poem needs at least one line. All right, so just to review very quickly, how many lines are in the first and second stanzas of our example poem, Dreams? Now, just like one long continuous stanza is showing reflection and thought, the same can be for long lines. The poet is using a long line to kind of show, again, just a thought that is continuing. For example, the poem Snow by David Berman. He simply says, "Walking through a field with my little brother Seth, I pointed to a place where kids had made angels in the snow. For some reason, I told him that a troop of angels had been shot and dissolved when they hit the ground." Okay, so again, this long line is just showing that the speaker is just thinking, reflecting, remembering a time in his past. Is he planning what he's going to tell us? Not exactly. He's just speaking from his mind and speaking from his heart. So long lines can be very similar to purpose as long stanzas. Sometimes a poet will use a long line to create a fast pace. Let's take a look at this awesome poem by John Loomis called Deer Hit. And again, look at how these longer lines are creating a quick pace. "You're 17 and tunnel vision drunk, swerving your father's Fairlane wagon home at 3 a.m. Two-lane road, all curves and dips. Dark woods, a stream, a patchy acre of tassel and grass. You don't see the deer till they turn their heads. Road full of eyeballs." All right, so again, the poet decided to purposely use long lines because he wanted you to read this poem quickly, much like the speaker is quickly driving down this dark road in his father's car, 17 and drunk. Definitely not a good idea. All right, on the other hand, short lines will slow the reader down, and it can also add drama. And sometimes the poet will continue to flow one idea to the next line. So one line will have an idea and it just kind of continues on down to the next line and continues on down to the next line. This is called enjambment. Now, the purpose of enjambment could be quite a few things, but one reason we use it is to maybe give information about a difficult idea. So let's take a look at the example, "We Real Cool." I'm actually going to start on the second stanza. "We real cool, we left school, we lurk late, we strike straight, we sing sin, we thin gin, we jazz June, we die soon." So again, the purpose of this continuing on from one idea and on one line to the next line is kind of giving us some information, right? It's kind of focusing on this idea almost of we, because the we is what continues on. We. You see that at the end of each line. And the reason the poet does that is because they want us as the reader to ask, well, wait, who is we? Why is we important? And that's really the point of this poem. Lines can also be used to keep the reader in suspense. Just like Deer Hit, the long lines and the enjambment, that continuing thought, is keeping us in suspense. Again, looking at the stanza, the main idea in the stanza is the problem. The problem is the speaker's 17, the speaker is drunk, and he's driving his father's car home. The second stanza then gives us the setting. It's 3 a.m. It's dark. It's hard to see, and the roads are curvy. Third stanza, there are deer. There are deer in the road, and I'm probably going to hit them. So the continuing from one line to the next, to the next, to the next is kind of keeping us in suspense. The speaker's drunk. That's bad. It's dark outside. That's even more bad. There are deer in the road. Ooh, that's worse. Lines can also add a surprise for the reader because the reader is so busy reading continuously that we can't stop to predict what will happen next. So just like with the boy driving drunk, we don't really get to stop and say what could happen next. Instead, the speaker tells us very quickly what happens next. And that's the same too with This Is Just to Say by William Carlos Williams. He tells us what happens next. I ate the fruit. What happens next? You were saving him, I think, for breakfast. What happens next? Please forgive me. So again, this idea of enjambment, where the idea continues from one line to the next, is to really, again, create this idea of flow, not really, the speaker's not really thinking about what they're saying, they're just saying it, and you're having to read it quickly, and you're not able to really think about what's coming next or predict what's coming next. So how do lines connect to structure? All right, last thing we're going to talk about is punctuation. Of course, periods are going to show us where a poet's idea ends. Very simple. In Dreams by Langston Hughes, he puts that period at the end of each stanza. Each stanza is one idea, and boom, that idea also ends with that period. All right, likewise, sometimes a poet won't use a period at all. This poet, John Loomis, uses commas so that we kind of know to maybe take a breath, but he's not using a period. And this is forcing, again, the reader to keep going. So again, that pace is fast. This content is coming to us quickly, and we're being surprised from one line to the next of what's happening to the speaker. Also in this poem, the poet decided to use dashes, and a dash is going to emphasize or highlight some important information or a change. So taking a look at the first stanza on the slide. 2-lane road, all curves and dips. Dark woods, a stream, a patchy acre. That dash there is to kind of show us that he's changing from the idea of the road to now the setting around the road. Second stanza here. You don't see the deer till they turn their heads. Road full of eyeballs. That dash there is to give us important information. There are deer, and they're not just around the road, they are on the road. And trust me, if you're driving, you do not want a deer in front of you on the road. Punctuation can also create rhythm, and that can support maybe the idea or theme of a poem. Take a look at this example by James Morrill, 6 minutes, 26 seconds. This is about running. Throat scorched, chest burning, fast jogging, keep up, 200 meters behind. So this person is running, and that period kind of helps create that rhythm of feet hitting the ground while running. Throat scorched, chest burning, fast jogging. You can kind of hear that rhythm connect to the idea of running. Pretty cool. So how does punctuation connect to structure? All right, let's conclude. Look, the way a poet decides to use stanzas, or maybe not use a stanza, to use lines, to use punctuation, or to not use punctuation, all of this is important. And these are other things that we need to start looking at to kind of understand what the poet is trying to say. These ideas are used maybe to separate out ideas within the poem, maybe to separate out different tones within one poem. Sometimes lines, stanzas, and punctuation will create a pace or create a rhythm for a poem. Sometimes stanzas, lines, and punctuation will make a poem read quickly or a poem read slowly. They might highlight drama or a twist of information. But almost always, you guys, they are going to emphasize the poet's message or theme in the poem. And so, again, as important as figurative language is in analyzing poetry, we have to start getting prepared at looking at stanzas, lines, and punctuation and their effect on the poet's message.